Hello everyone, it is I, Witch of Paint. You may have noticed that this video is a tiny little bit earlier than usual. That is because today is the day of the Summer Solstice, the longest day of the year and the shortest night of the year. And to celebrate this, I have decided to bring out a special solstice video. Of course, you are all still going to get a video on Sunday, but today you get an extra one! Yay! So, this is all about the summer solstice, more specifically about Litha, the pagan holiday that celebrates this day. And before filming this video, I have already done a little bit of research into the celebrations and symbolisms of the day. There's a few sources down below, including the 2 videos that I watched before I started painting this because they inspired the colour palette, as well as the overall flower theme of the painting itself. So, because of what I had watched beforehand, I decided to paint a little summer solstice fairy inside a yellow flower that is supposed to be sort of reminiscent of a sunflower, but also kind of isn't, because the leaves are a bit too short. But anyways, that's why at the beginning of the video I first tried to put a tape roll on there to see if it would be big enough for the circle I had planned, but then I decided, I'm going to need a pair of compasses, even though I was scared to use those because they put holes into the paper, but technically one hole, but still a hole is a hole is a hole. So first I work out the sort of middle of the paper, mark it, and then put my compasses down to draw a circle, basically. And around the circle I draw a bunch of petals, although I think I sketch those in towards the end and first start sketching out the fairy inside. The fairy is sort of kind of just merrily skipping along, enjoying her day happily, and there's a little butterfly as well. She'll get a dress made from a bodice that has green leaves and a skirt that's made of flower petals, and she's going to be wearing a flower crown in her hair, and her wings are also going to be made to look like a flower, and there's going to be lots of flowers blooming around her as well. And for this painting, I will be using my Winsor Newton flower palette because it fits quite well with the flower theme. You can tell this is going to be very flowery because I have said flowers so many times in the last couple of sentences. I will try to not repeat that too much throughout the video. Now, let's talk about Litha and discover what exactly the story behind it is. Litha marks the beginning of summer and is the longest day of the year. It is a day when the forces of dark and light are fighting again and the balance shifts over. From now on, the Holly King, who represents the darkness of the night, wins the battle against the Oak King, who represents the light, thus making the days shorter and the nights longer until the winter solstice or Yule. The day is celebrated usually with bonfires, much like at Beltane, or simply by, going outside or rising with the sun and spending as much time outside as possible, cherishing the long hours of the day. During this day, it was believed that the fairy folk would pass through from the realm to ours and grant blessings and wishes. Only fitting then that I am painting a happy little fairy today, which was both kind of unplanned and also very planned, because I did have in mind that I was going to paint a fairy for today. It just wasn't for the reason that on the day of the solstice the fairies are going to be coming out and about. The Celts also celebrated the goddess Danu, who represents the earth and fruitfulness on this day. And then Christianity came along and turned Litha into St. John's Day in order to celebrate their favourite Baptist, whose birthday is apparently 6 months before Jesus, which just so happens to put it on the day of the summer solstice. Well, technically a few days after, but we are not here to talk about Christianity, so let's not get too hung up on that, okay? Okay, because reading about this made me very curious about this goddess Danu, so let's find out more about her, shall we? She is one of the more ancient gods of the Celtic pantheon, making her to be very likely sort of a mother goddess kind of deal. Danu is referenced in a lot of Irish places, but there's not that much information about her because there's very little sources left that mention her. But there are places in Ireland that are named after her, such as the Paps of Anu in Kerry, and she's also associated with rivers. On one hand, she is a benevolent, motherly goddess, while on the other hand, she's a strong warrior goddess. So she's kind of got like two different sides to her, you know. Makes sense to me. Mothers do have to defend their children after all. Also, something fun I have found out is that the word Dan in Irish means art, skill, poetry, knowledge, and wisdom, which makes sense because her people, the people of Danu, which we will come to later, were also associated with those kind of things. Danu nurtured the god of light and healing, Bile, I'm not sure how to pronounce him, who was represented as an oak tree. I suppose that this is where we get the term Oak King, who loses this battle on this day from. However, she is also mostly associated with the Tuatha Danaan, I hope I pronounced that right, who are the people of Danu. Descended from Nemed, they had been exiled from Ireland and given patronage by Danu. This allowed them to regroup, strengthen themselves again, and also allowed them to gain some nice magical skills. I will leave a link down below about the article about them and also who Nemed is if you want to know more about them. Now, let's talk about the painting itself. After the sketch, I, of course, outline everything with my black waterproof ink using my Glister pen. I start with the petals, being very, very careful that the lines only just touch the sketch of the circle, which is going to be outlined next. I am going to be very careful with it because I wanted to keep the sort of roundness of the circle itself as perfect as I could with my hand, which obviously was quite easy because I already had an outline to work with, but I was still very, very slow and careful, even if in the video, of course, it's all sped up, so I've got that circle sketched and outlined in a few seconds. Oh, the fantastic magic of video editing, am I right? Then finally, once I'm done with that, I outline the sketch inside the circle, so the fairy in all her glory, and the wobbly trees behind her. I made the trees wobbly, by the way, because that way I thought it would look a little more wild and magical. It's like, the trees weren't forced to grow in a straight line, although the first trees that I did sketch were straight lined, but then I decided, nah, let's make them wobbly. And of course, let's not forget that I also outlined the flowers that are sort of below the fairy in the front, the foreground, this sort of partially made up, partially real flowers that I drew there, just to sort of bring out the summery vibes that I wanted this painting to have. Then I finally started the painting itself. I first wet the entire circle, not the petals outside of it, of course, and I covered everything with a small light layer of lemon yellow from the Winsor Newton flower palette. With a little bit of the cadmium yellow, I add in some darker areas, sort of, just make them a little warmer and stuff. And once I had all of that dry, I started to give everything else a lot more colour. I mixed some of the cadmium red hue with the yellows and shaded some parts of the petals on her skirt. Now, after I did this, I quickly started thinking, oh no! It's giving autumn vibes! It's not summery anymore, it looks like autumn, and especially with the leafy bodice of the dress, and I was starting to question all my design choices at that point. But I persisted, and I decided, okay, we just gotta add in more different colours to this whole thing. And maybe I shouldn't have done the skirt in yellow and orange, because that is a definite autumn vibe right there. But the yellow thing was just the underpainting, and I would paint over it anyway, so it didn't really matter, and I tried to keep telling myself that as I went along. But that is the point of trusting the process, right? Even if it's not looking like what you wanted from the start, you know, you can always push the painting to reach a point you are happy with it. So if it's not looking summery enough, make the colours more summery. Which did take a while. The painting itself, I think, took almost 3 hours to finish for me. And that's just the painting. I spent technically an entire afternoon on just the painting itself. That was very fun though. So, I painted the bodice of her dress in green to make sure that the leaves looked more like they were fresh leaves and not, autumn leaves and stuff. So I used the sap green for that, and her hair has been painted in a mix of permanent rose and dioxazine purple to bring out more colours in the painting than just yellows and oranges. And I kind of wanted the fairy to be more colourful, and I kind of did and also didn't succeed in that, but she looks awesome anyway. Now, below her, as you can see, and as I have mentioned before, there are flowers lining the circle. I painted some of those that should resemble dandelions a little bit, some that resemble daisies, and then one that is a foxglove, just because I kind of felt like it. But some of these flowers are just random made-up flowers. I just thought that the flowers would help show that this is a summer painting and not an autumn painting, Although I didn't really think it was going to look like an autumn painting from the start. Anyway, for the trees, of course, I had to mix a brown colour because the flower palette doesn't come with a brown colour. So to deal with that, I mixed the sap green with some cadmium deep just enough that it was a brown colour that looked neither green nor orange. Although I do add in some mossy bits to the trees because a lot of trees do have moss growing on them in the wild. I think it makes them look more mystical as well, and to achieve the sort of dark green moss kind of colour, I do mix in some ultramarine into my greens. And the dark greens I mix are mostly used for either shadow work or for the background behind the wonky trees, so as to add a little bit of depth to the overall image. And then I realised that the dark skin tone that I had given the fairy was starting to blend into the colour of the trees because it was the same sort of brownish shade. So I tried to make the trees a little darker to fix this. It does sort of work. Her arm is still quite tree brown, but in the end, she's a fairy and she's a tree fairy, so maybe that's just the way that they are, right? Right. On the grass below her, I add in a couple of different coloured dots to put in a little bit like make it look like there's a couple of flowers here and there. I had a couple of lines with the sap green to make sure that it looks a little grassy. I don't draw in each individual grass petal this time, just because I think that would have made everything a little bit too busy. And then I consider the middle bit done and move on to the outside of the flower itself. So the petals that are around the circle, I paint those, each and every one of them, one by one, with a coat of lemon yellow as a sort of base colour, since this was going to be a sort of sunflower looking kind of flower outside of it, and also because yellow is a very prominent colour for Litha. It represents the light of the day and the sun, obviously, and yellow is generally a bright and happy colour, so it suited this quite well. Plus, I really like flowers at the moment. I don't know, they are very inspiring. Just going out and finding all the different little flowers, maybe some that I have never really seen before or that I don't even know the names of. I don't know, it's really, really fun to draw flowers for me right now. That's why I'm doing so many flower-themed things lately. But once the base colour is dry, I go in with my cadmium yellow and I add in some shadows to make everything look more like petals, I was actually also contemplating if I should add some metallic paints to the painting as well, but eventually I decided against it because I was painting for long enough. The afternoon was almost over and I needed a break from painting, so I ended up not adding in any metallic watercolours, partially also because I wasn't sure where I would add them in. I was thinking either the petals outside the circle or maybe the fairy's wings, but I couldn't decide on where to put them even, so I decided, yeah, no, let's leave them and move on. Now we have reached the end of this Summer Solstice special. Let's take a look at the final results together now, I am so in love with the overall look of this painting. I am so glad I didn't give up when I was giving too many autumn vibes, because now it looks absolutely fantastic and bright. I love how the circle with the petals sort of looks like a flowery frame of a picture, and the fairy looks so happy and beautiful with her purple flowing hair and her cute little dress. Her flowery wings are absolutely gorgeous as well, and I am happy with the overall pose for her. The background looks like a magical forest, and the flowers add the summery touch this painting needs. So, I hope you guys enjoyed watching me paint this Summer Solstice fairy for Litha, and if you did, like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment something fun about the Summer Solstice, maybe a way that you spent this day. But for now, I am the Witch of Paint, and I will see you all on Sunday. Bye! Oh, would you look at that? You've made it to the end of this video. Well done for that. As a reward, I shall give you a few little outtakes. Have fun! That is because today is the day of the Summer Solstice, the longest day of the year, and the shortest, not shouldest. However, she's mostly associated with the... I don't know how to pronounce it. Tuatha de Danaan. I'm going to go watch a video on how to pronounce that. But then I decided, let's make them wobbly. Wibbly wobbly, yay.